"Wait, are you going to put that in me?" The maid woman bride froze. But the Mafia boss. The service elevator at the Harborview Regent Hotel always smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale coffee, a scent that had settled deep into Lila Moreno's pores after 3 years of double shifts. It was 2 a.m. Her feet throbbed in her sensible black work shoes, a dull ache that radiated up her calves, but she kept her posture straight as the metal doors rattled open on the penthouse floor. Lila checked the cart in front of her, ensuring the stack of fresh towels was perfectly aligned. She was not supposed to be here this late. The shift manager, a man with a nasally voice and a penchant for cutting corners, had forgotten to flag the presidential suite for a turnover earlier in the day. Now it was Lila's problem. If the room was not pristine by 6 a.m. for the incoming VIP guest, it would be her pay docked, not his. She pulled her phone from her apron pocket for a brief second. There was a text message from her younger sister. "Elena, don't worry about the tuition payment yet. I can ask for an extension?" Lila sighed, typing back a quick response with one thumb. "Absolutely not. I have the overtime pay coming. Focus on your finals." She shoved the phone back into her pocket. Elena was the reason Lila worked 60 hours a week. Elena was the brilliant one. The one with a future that did not involve scrubbing toilets or smoothing wrinkles out of Egyptian cotton sheets. Lila had made peace with her own life being a series of sacrifices, as long as it meant Elena got out of their cramped apartment and into a life where she did not have to count every penny at the grocery store. The hallway on the top floor was silent, lined with plush carpet that swallowed the sound of the cart's wheels. The sconces on the wall cast a warm, golden glow, designed to make guests feel wealthy just by walking to their rooms. Lila reached the heavy double doors of the main suite. Her key card was in her hand, but she hesitated. The light indicator on the lock was usually red when occupied, green when empty. It was dark. She tapped the card against the sensor. The lock clicked, and she pushed the door open, announcing herself out of habit, "Housekeeping." Her voice was soft, barely a whisper in the cavernous entryway. Silence greeted her. She exhaled, relieved. If the room was empty, she could blast through the cleaning in an hour and maybe get 3 hours of sleep before her morning shift started back up at 7. She rolled the cart inside and parked it by the coat closet. The suite was massive, a sprawling expanse of marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline of Harborview. She moved toward the living area, intending to start with the trash, but stopped dead. Voices, low, rumbling, and distinct. They were coming from the private study, a room off to the left where the heavy oak doors were cracked open just an inch. Lila froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Guests were supposed to check in at the front desk. The system said this room was vacant. If she had walked in on a high-profile guest, she could be fired on the spot. She took a step back, intending to retreat silently, but the words drifting through the crack in the door made her blood run cold. "We have a leak in the shipping lanes," a deep baritone voice said. It was calm, dangerously steady. The trajectory was compromised 3 times this month. That is not bad luck. "Marco, that is a traitor." Another voice, higher and more agitated, responded, "I swear to you, Dominic, my men are solid. We checked the manifest. Nobody knew about the drop except the inner circle." "Then the inner circle is rotting," the first voice replied. "The temperature in the tone dropped 10 degrees. Find the rot. Cut it out. I do not care who it is. If they are selling our territories to the Corvetti family, I want them buried by sunrise." Lila stopped breathing. She knew the name Corvetti. Everyone in Harborview knew the name, usually whispered in fear or splashed across the crime beat section of the newspaper, and she knew who the Vale Syndicate was. Even if she had never seen them up close, they were the shadow that lay over the city. The reason certain businesses paid protection money and why nobody walked near the docks after midnight. She took another step back, her eyes wide with terror. She had to leave. Now, she turned. Her movement too quick, too clumsy. Her elbow clipped a decorative pedestal near the entrance. A heavy crystal vase wobbled. Lila lunged for it, her fingers brushing the cold glass, but she was a fraction of a second too slow. The vase hit the marble floor with a sound that cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Glass shattered, sending shards skittering across the polished stone. Lila stood frozen, her hand still outstretched, staring at the destruction. The voices in the study stopped instantly. Before she could move, before she could even formulate a lie, the study doors flew open. 3 men stepped out. 2 of them were large, their hands immediately going to the inside of their jackets, where Lila knew, with sickening certainty, they were hiding guns. But it was the 3rd man who commanded the room. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Lila would earn in a decade. His hair was dark, swept back from a face that was strikingly handsome but hard, like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, dark gray and terrifyingly intelligent. Dominic Vale. The 2 other men moved toward her, aggression radiating off them in waves. "Wait," Dominic said. His voice was not loud, but the single word stopped his men in their tracks. He did not look at them. His gaze was fixed entirely on Lila. "Leave us," Dominic ordered. "Boss, she heard too much." The agitated man, Marco, protested. "We cannot just—" "I said leave us," Dominic repeated. His tone did not change, but the threat in it was unmistakable. "Wait in the hall." The 2 men hesitated, then glared at Lila before stepping past her and exiting the suite, the heavy front door clicking shut behind them. Lila was alone with the most dangerous man in the city. She was trembling so hard she thought her knees might give out. She clutched her hands together in front of her apron, trying to stop them from shaking. Dominic did not move. He stood by the study doors, watching her with that unnerving, predatory stillness. "I'm so sorry," Lila stammered, her voice shaking. "I did not know anyone was here. I was just—" "Come here," Dominic said. It was not a request. Lila forced her legs to move. She stepped over the shards of crystal, stopping 5 feet away from him. She kept her head down, afraid to look him in the eye, afraid of what she might see. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She lifted her chin. His face was unreadable, but up close, the intensity of his gaze was overwhelming. He was studying her, cataloging every detail, her frayed uniform, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her chest heaved with shallow breaths. "What is your name?" he asked. "Lila," she whispered. "Lila Moreno." "Lila," Dominic repeated, testing the sound of it. He took a step closer. She smelled expensive cologne and something sharper, like gunpowder or ozone. "Tell me, Lila, what did you hear?" "Nothing," she said quickly, too quickly. "I heard nothing. I just walked in. I dropped the vase. That is all." He tilted his head slightly. His eyes dropped to her hands, watching the tremors she could not control. "You are lying," he stated matter-of-factly. "You were standing there for at least 20 seconds before the vase fell. I heard the cart stop." Lila felt the blood drain from her face. He had known she was there. He had known, and he had kept talking. "I do not understand anything about business," she said, her voice rising in panic. "I am a maid. I clean rooms. I scrub toilets. I do not care about territories or shipments. I just want to keep my job. Please, I have a sister. I just need this job." She waited for him to yell, to strike her, to call his men back in. Instead, Dominic watched her. He saw the flush on her cheeks, the way she dug her fingernails into her palms to keep from crying. He saw the terror. Yes, but he also saw something else. She was standing her ground. She was terrified, but she was not begging for her life. She was begging for her employment. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He was so tall she had to crane her neck to keep eye contact. "If you repeat a single word of what you heard tonight," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated in her chest, "you will not have to worry about losing your job. You will have to worry about losing everything else. Do you understand me?" "Yes," Lila breathed. "I understand. I swear." He held her gaze for a long moment, searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded once. "Go. Clean up this glass first, then go." Lila did not need to be told twice. She fell to her knees, heedless of the sharp edges, and began gathering the large pieces of crystal with her bare hands. Dominic stood over her for a moment longer, a silent sentinel, before turning and walking back into the study, closing the door firmly behind him. 2 hours later, Lila clocked out. Her hands were covered in tiny microcuts from the glass, stinging in the cold night air. She changed into her street clothes, a worn denim jacket and jeans, and headed for the staff exit at the back of the hotel. The staff parking garage was a concrete dungeon, dimly lit and freezing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently. Lila walked quickly toward the bus stop at the edge of the property. She did not have a car. She usually took the night bus. But tonight she had missed the last express and would have to wait 30 minutes for the local. She heard footsteps behind her. Lila gripped her purse strap tighter and quickened her pace. The footsteps sped up. "Hey, sweetheart?" Lila froze. She turned around. A man she did not recognize was standing 10 feet away. He was wearing a dark hoodie, his face partially obscured. He did not look like hotel staff. "You were up in the penthouse," the man said. He took a step forward. "With Mr. Vale." "I was cleaning," Lila said, her voice steady despite the fear spiking in her chest. "Cleaning?" The man scoffed. "You were in there a long time. Maybe you heard things you should not have. Maybe you need someone to help you forget." He lunged. Lila stumbled back, opening her mouth to scream, but the sound died in her throat as a shadow detached itself from a concrete pillar behind the man. It happened so fast she barely processed it. One moment the man was reaching for her. The next, he was slammed face first into the concrete wall. Dominic Vale had him pinned by the throat, his forearm pressing against the man's windpipe. Dominic did not shout. He leaned in close to the man's ear, his voice deadly calm. "You are fishing in the wrong waters," Dominic said. The man gagged, clawing uselessly at Dominic's arm. "She is hotel staff," Dominic continued. "If I see you near her, or near this hotel again, nobody will ever find your body. Do I make myself clear?" The man nodded frantically. Dominic stepped back, releasing him. The man gasped for air, looked from Dominic to Lila with wide eyes, and then scrambled away, running toward the exit ramp. Lila stood paralyzed, her back pressed against a parked car. Dominic straightened his cuffs, as if he had just brushed off a speck of dust rather than assaulted a man. He turned to her, under the harsh garage lights. He looked even more imposing. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Lila managed to say. Who was that? "Someone who thinks they can trade information for favor," Dominic said. He looked around the desolate garage. "Where is your car?" "I do not have one," she said. "I take the bus." Dominic frowned. "Not tonight." He gestured with his hand. A sleek black sedan idled quietly a few rows over. The engine purred as it pulled up, driven by one of the men from the suite. Dominic opened the back door. "Get in." "I cannot," Lila protested. "I cannot get in a car with you." "You can. And you will," Dominic said. "It is 3 a.m. You just had a man try to corner you because he thinks you are a snitch. You are not safe walking. Get in the car." "Lila," there was no room for argument in his tone. Lila hesitated, looking at the dark exit where the man had run, and then at the warm, safe interior of the car. She slid into the back seat. Dominic got in beside her. The door closed, shutting out the noise of the city. The interior smelled of leather and that same faint scent of gunpowder. "Where do you live?" Dominic asked. Lila gave him her address, a small apartment complex on the north side of the city, far from the luxury of Harborview. The driver nodded, and the car pulled away smoothly. The ride was silent. Lila sat pressed against her door, trying to make herself as small as possible. She could feel Dominic's presence next to her, a heavy, magnetic weight. She stole a glance at him. He was looking out the window, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. He looked tired. She realized, beneath the danger and the power, there was a weariness in the set of his jaw. She looked down at her hands. They were still trembling slightly. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Dominic's jaw tighten. He had noticed. He noticed everything. He did not say a word, did not offer hollow platitudes, but he shifted slightly, angling his body to shield her from the view of the driver, creating a small, private space in the back seat. When they pulled up to her apartment building, the contrast was stark. The sleek luxury car looked alien next to the cracked sidewalk and the peeling paint of the lobby door. Dominic opened his door and got out. Lila scrambled to follow. "You did not have to do this," she said, standing on the sidewalk. "Thank you." He did not get back in the car. He walked her all the way to the glass front door of the building. He stopped, leaning one arm above the doorframe, boxing her in slightly. It was not threatening, exactly, but it was overwhelming. He was so large, so solid. "Lila," he said. She looked up at him. Her heart was racing, a confusing mix of lingering fear and a sudden, sharp attraction that she had no business feeling. His eyes were dark pools, reflecting the yellow street lamp above them. "You are a loose end," he said. It was blunt, brutal. "I told you, I will not say anything." She insisted. "It does not matter what you say," Dominic said quietly. "It matters what my enemies think you know. That man tonight, he was just a freelancer. If my rivals think you overheard plans about the shipment, they will come for you. They will try to use you to get to me." Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. What do I do?" "I am going to fix it," Dominic said. "How?" He looked down at her mouth, then back up to her eyes. The air between them crackled. For a second, she thought he might touch her. He seemed to lean in, just an inch, his body heat radiating toward her. "Go inside," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Lock your door. Do not open it for anyone but me." He pushed off the door frame and turned away. Walking back to the waiting car without looking back, Lila watched him go, her breath hitching in her throat, before she hurried inside and turned all 3 locks on her door. The next day, the hotel felt different. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Lila jumped when a door slammed. She kept her head down, moving from room to room with efficient, nervous energy. At noon, her manager found her stripping a bed on the 10th floor. "Mr. Vale requests your presence," the manager said, looking at Lila with a mixture of confusion and newfound respect. "He is in the Solaris lounge." Lila's stomach dropped. She nodded, smoothing her apron, and followed the manager's directions. The Solaris lounge was a private area on the roof, usually reserved for platinum members. It was empty today, except for Dominic. He was standing by the railing, looking out over the harbor. The wind whipped his dark hair, but he looked immovable. He turned as she approached. He was wearing a different suit today, navy blue, crisp and intimidating. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a velvet armchair. Lila sat on the edge of the seat. Dominic remained standing. "I have been thinking about our problem," he said. "Our problem?" Lila asked weakly. "My enemies know your face now," Dominic said. "Word travels fast. They know a maid was in the room during a council meeting. They will assume you are an informant or a weakness. I cannot put a security detail on a hotel maid without raising more questions. It would paint a target on your back larger than the one already there." "So what do I do?" Lila asked, panic rising again. "Do I quit? Do I leave town? I cannot leave my sister." "No," Dominic said. "You do not run. Running makes you prey." He walked over to her and sat on the coffee table in front of her chair. It brought him down to her eye level. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. "I have a solution," he said. "It is radical, but it is the only way to ensure your safety and solve my own issues within the syndicate." "What is it?" Lila whispered. "You marry me," he said. The world seemed to stop spinning. Lila stared at him. Sure, she had misheard. "Excuse me?" "We enter a protected arrangement," Dominic explained, his tone businesslike, as if discussing a merger. "On paper, you become my wife. We create a narrative. We say we have been seeing each other privately. That fixes the loose end. If you are my wife, you are untouchable. I can put guards on you. I can move you into my estate. No one touches the wife of the Dawn without starting a war." "You are crazy," Lila said, her voice trembling. "I am just a maid. Dominic, I am nobody. Why would you want to marry me?" Dominic's gaze softened. It was a subtle shift, the hard lines around his eyes relaxing. He reached out, his hand large and warm, and brushed his fingers against her wrist. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up her arm, shocking her into silence. He did not pull away. His thumb swept lightly over her pulse point, feeling the frantic rhythm of her heart. "I do not need a princess." "Lila," he said quietly, "I have plenty of women who want the title for the money or the power. They are sharks. They talk too much. They want too much." He leaned closer, his intensity pinning her to the chair. "I saw you last night. You were terrified, but you did not break. You looked me in the eye and you told me the truth. You protected your sister before yourself." He squeezed her wrist gently, a promise of protection in the gesture. "I do not need a queen from a crime family," he said. "I need someone I can trust." Lila looked at him, breathless, her mind racing with 1,000 reasons to say no, while her heart pounded out a dangerous, reckless rhythm that sounded suspiciously like yes. The ceiling fan in Lila Moreno's bedroom clicked with a rhythmic, taunting sound, marking the seconds of a night that refused to end. It was 4 a.m. Lila lay on top of her mismatched sheets, staring at a water stain on the plaster that looked vaguely like a storm cloud. She had not slept for a single minute since Dominic Vale had dropped her off at her door. Her phone sat on the nightstand, silent and black. Every time she looked at it, she thought of Elena. Her sister was 300 miles away at university, sleeping soundly, unaware that her tuition was about to be paid by a man who likely had snipers on his payroll. Lila rolled over, burying her face in her pillow. The proposal was insane. It was the plot of a bad movie. Marry a mafia boss to stay alive? It was ridiculous. But then the image of the man in the parking garage flashed behind her eyelids, the way he had lunged at her, the promise of violence in his eyes, and then came the image of Dominic. She remembered the weight of his presence as he stood in her doorway. "I do not need a princess. I need someone I can trust." If she said no, she was a loose end, a target. If she said yes, she was a target, but she would be a target behind a wall of steel and money. And Elena would be safe. By the time the sun bled gray light through her thin curtains, Lila had made her choice. She showered, dressed in her best blouse, a simple white button-down that had seen better days, and waited. At noon, a car arrived. It was not the black sedan from the night before, but a silver coupe, understated and expensive. The driver opened the door without a word. They drove into the heart of the city, stopping at a restaurant that had no sign out front, just a heavy wooden door and a valet who nodded at the driver. Inside, the air smelled of truffle oil and old money. The lighting was dim, designed to obscure faces and facilitate secrets. Dominic was waiting in a circular booth at the back, shielded by high velvet walls. He stood when she approached. It was a reflex of old-world manners that caught her off guard. He wore a gray suit today, vest unbuttoned, looking less like a warlord and more like a weary CEO. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the leather bench opposite him. Lila sat. Her hands were shaking again, so she tucked them under the table. "Now have you eaten?" Dominic asked. "No," Lila said. "I cannot eat." Dominic signaled a waiter with a mere lift of his finger. "Bring us the grilled fish and sparkling water, and leave us." The waiter vanished. Dominic leaned forward, clasping his hands on the white tablecloth. "I assume you have an answer." He said, "I do," Lila said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "But I have conditions." Dominic's eyebrows rose slightly. A flicker of amusement crossed his face, gone as quickly as it came. "Name them." "My sister," Lila said. "Elena. She's in her 2nd year of nursing school. She is struggling with the tuition. If I do this, if I put myself in this danger, I want her debt cleared. I want her expenses paid until she graduates. And I want her kept out of this. She can never know who you are or what this arrangement is really about." "Done," Dominic said instantly. "Her tuition will be paid in full by the end of the business day. I will set up a trust for her living expenses. As far as she knows, you received a promotion and a raise." Lila blinked. She had expected a negotiation, a fight. He had agreed to tens of thousands of dollars as if she had asked for a glass of water. "What else?" he asked. "I will not." Lila faltered, her face heating up. I mean, this is a marriage on paper, for protection. I will not share a bed with you. I will not be a real wife in that way. Dominic's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened slightly, scanning her face. I told you last night. Lila, I am not looking for a mistress. I have no interest in forcing myself on anyone. You will have your own suite. You will have your privacy. We will share a roof and a public image. That is all. Lila exhaled, the knot in her chest loosening slightly. Then, okay. I will do it, she said. I will marry you. Dominic nodded once, solemn and final, then eat. We have a lawyer waiting for us at 2 o'clock. The lawyer's office was a glass box in the sky. Overlooking the harbor, the lawyer, a thin man with spectacles named Mr. Silas, did not look at Lila. He just slid papers across the mahogany desk, explaining terms in a dry drone. Prenuptial agreement, non-disclosure agreement, asset protection trust. It felt cold, clinical. Lila signed her name on line after line, her signature becoming more jagged as her nerves frayed. This was it. She was signing away her life, her freedom, her name. The final document was the marriage license application, which Mr. Silas had somehow already procured. Lila held the pen over the line, but her hand froze. The tip of the pen hovered, trembling. A drop of ink bled onto the paper. She could not breathe. The reality of it crashed down on her. She was marrying a stranger, a dangerous stranger. Suddenly, a large hand covered hers. Lila jumped, looking up. Dominic had moved from his chair. He was standing beside her, leaning over the desk. His hand was warm, heavy, and completely steady. He did not take the pen from her. He just encompassed her trembling fingers with his own, grounding her. Breathe, Lila, he murmured, his voice low enough that the lawyer could not hear. She looked up at him. His face was close, the scent of sandalwood and starch filling her senses. He was not looking at the paper. He was looking right at her, his gray eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made the room fade away. I have you, he said softly. Just right. The warmth of his hand seeped into her cold skin. The trembling slowed. Guided by his steady grip, she lowered the pen and wrote Lila Moreno. Dominic did not let go immediately. For a second after she finished, his hand lingered over hers, his thumb brushing against her knuckle. It felt unnervingly intimate, a connection that went beyond the ink and the paper. Then he pulled back, straightening his suit jacket, and the moment was gone. The townhouse in Harborview was less a house and more a fortress disguised as a mansion. The foyer was marble and gold, echoing with the sound of Lila's cheap sneakers squeaking on the floor. Dominic led her into the main drawing room. 4 men were waiting. They stopped talking the moment Dominic entered. Lila recognized one of them, Marco, the man from the hotel room. The one who had argued about the traitor. He was looking at her with open hostility. Gentlemen, Dominic said, his voice projecting authority that demanded silence. I have an announcement. He stepped to the side, placing a hand on the small of Lila's back. He pushed her forward slightly, presenting her. This is Lila Moreno, Dominic said. We are to be married within the week. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. The men exchanged glances, shock, disbelief. Marco stepped forward, his face twisting. Boss, he said, his voice tight, with all due respect. This is the maid. From the hotel. She is my fiancée, Dominic corrected, his tone sharpening like a blade, and you will address her with the respect that title commands. Marco looked from Dominic to Lila, his eyes narrowing. He was calculating, assessing her value, her threat level. Lila felt small under his gaze, but she remembered Dominic's words. I need someone I can trust. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin, and met Marco's stare. She would not cower, not here. Dominic felt the shift in her posture, his hand on her back pressed firmer, a silent signal of approval. She will be moving in immediately, Dominic continued. Increase the perimeter security. If anyone outside this room learns of her identity before the official announcement, I will hold you personally responsible. Clear. Clear, boss. The men murmured in unison. though Marco's response came a beat later than the others. The next 3 days were a blur of transformation. Dominic did not just give her a room, he gave her a curriculum. He taught her how to walk. You move like you are trying to be invisible. He told her in the library, watching her cross the room, "You apologize with your shoulders. Stop it. I have spent my whole life trying to be invisible," Lila shot back, frustrated. "It is how you keep your job when you are the help." "You are not the help anymore," Dominic said. "You are the lady of the house. Walk like you own the floorboards." He hired a stylist who brought racks of clothing, silks, cashmeres, tailored wool. Gone were her oversized denim jackets and worn leggings. In their place were sheath dresses, high-waisted trousers, and heels that clicked with authority. On the 3rd evening, they were scheduled to have dinner together. It was a test run. Dominic had said, a chance to practice their dynamic before facing the public. Lila dressed in one of the new outfits the stylist had insisted upon. It was a midnight blue cocktail dress, fitted through the waist and falling to just below her knees. It was modest, but the cut was impeccable, hugging her curves in a way she had never seen before. She pinned her hair up, leaving a few tendrils loose, and applied the red lipstick the stylist had left. She walked down the grand staircase. Dominic was waiting at the bottom, checking his watch. "I am ready," Lila said. Dominic looked up. His hand froze in the act of adjusting his cufflink. He stared at her. His gaze started at her face, traveled down the length of the blue dress, and came back up to her eyes. He stood perfectly still, but Lila saw his throat work, a heavy swallow as if his mouth had suddenly gone dry. For 5 seconds, he said nothing. The air between them grew thick, charged with a sudden, palpable tension. "You look—" Dominic started, his voice rougher than usual. He cleared his throat, looking away for a brief moment before meeting her eyes again. "You look the part." "Thank you," Lila said, a flush rising on her cheeks. She felt exposed, yet strangely powerful. They moved to the dining room. The table was set with candlelight, crystal glasses shimmering in the flickering glow. A chef had prepared a meal of roasted lamb and vegetables. As they sat, the chef brought out a bottle of wine. Lila, operating on years of muscle memory, immediately reached out to take the bottle from him. "I will pour," she said instinctively. The chef looked awkward. Dominic's hand shot out, gently catching her wrist before she could touch the bottle. "Lila," he said softly. Lila froze, realizing what she was doing. She was acting like a waitress at her own engagement dinner. She pulled her hand back as if burned. "I am sorry," she stammered. "I just... habit." Dominic took the bottle from the chef, dismissing him with a nod. He stood up and walked around the table to Lila's side. "You do not serve anyone in this house," he said quietly, pouring the wine into her glass. "Not anymore, and certainly not me." He sat back down across from her. He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Lila raised her glass, her hand trembling only slightly. "To survival," she whispered. Dominic clinked his glass against hers. "To both." After dinner, the real work began. Dominic led her to the drawing room where he had set up a camera on a tripod. "We need photos for the press release," he explained. "The narrative is that we are in love. The world needs to believe it." He set the timer on the camera and walked over to where Lila stood by the fireplace. "Stand closer," he instructed. Lila took a small step toward him. "Closer," Dominic said. She stepped again, until the toes of her heels brushed his polished shoes. "Put your hand on my chest," he ordered. Lila hesitated, then raised her hand, placing it flat against the lapel of his jacket. She could feel the solid muscle beneath the wool, the steady thrum of his heartbeat. "Look at me," Dominic said, "like you want me." "I do not know how to do that," Lila admitted, feeling foolish. Dominic sighed, a puff of warm air. He reached out, his hands settling on her waist. They were large, spanning the curve of her hips. He pulled her in, eliminating the inch of space between them. "Just look at me." "Lila," he whispered, leaning down. His face was inches from hers. "Think about the secret we share. Think about the fact that I am the only person in the world who knows who you really are." Lila looked up. His eyes were heavy-lidded, focused on her mouth, his breath ghosted against her cheek, warm and scented with wine. The camera clicked, a flash of light, but neither of them blinked. "Turn your head," Dominic murmured, his lips brushing her ear. "Let me hold you from behind." Lila turned. Dominic wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. She felt surrounded by him, encompassed by his strength. "Relax into me," he instructed. She tried to lean back, but her heel caught on the edge of the rug. She stumbled, gasping. Dominic reacted instantly. His arms tightened like steel bands, catching her before she could fall. He spun her around, pulling her hard against his chest to stabilize her. Lila's hands flew up to grip his shoulders. They were pressed together, chest to chest, hip to hip. The camera flashed again, capturing the blur of movement, but they were not posing anymore. They stood there for a long, stretched heartbeat. Lila could feel the heat radiating off him. She looked up, breathless, and saw Dominic looking down at her with a raw, unguarded hunger that terrified and thrilled her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "Yes," she breathed. He did not let go. His thumbs rubbed slow circles into the fabric of her dress at her waist. Then, as if realizing what he was doing, he abruptly stepped back, creating a cold void of space between them. "We have enough photos," he said abruptly, turning his back to her to dismantle the camera. "Go to bed, Lila." Lila could not sleep. The memory of his hands on her waist burned like a brand. She tossed and turned for an hour before giving up. She needed air. She wrapped a silk robe over her nightgown, another gift from the stylist, and stepped out onto the balcony that connected her room to the main hallway. The night air was crisp, carrying the salt tang of the harbor. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing mind. "You are awake!" Lila jumped. Dominic was standing at the far end of the balcony, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He had discarded his jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. "I could not sleep," Lila said, hugging her arms around herself. "I keep thinking I am going to mess this up today. With the wine. I am not cut out for this. Dominic, I am going to embarrass you." Dominic walked over to the railing, standing beside her. He looked out at the city lights, the kingdom he ruled. "You will not embarrass me," he said. "You are stronger than you think." He took a sip of his drink. "My father built this house," he said suddenly. "He was a vicious man. He ruled by fear. He thought fear was the only currency that mattered. When he died, it was violent. He was betrayed by his own brother." Lila turned to him, her eyes wide. She stayed silent, sensing he needed to speak. "I was 22. Dominic continued. "I had to take over that night. I had to clean up the mess. I had to become something I was not sure I wanted to be. I made mistakes. Lila, I stumbled, but I learned that fear is cheap. Loyalty. Loyalty is rare." He turned his head to look at her. His eyes were stark, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "You did not sell me out in that hotel room," he said softly. "You were terrified, but you did not sell me out. That is worth more than all the etiquette training in the world." Lila felt a surge of emotion, empathy, respect, and something softer. Without thinking, she reached out. She placed her hand on his forearm, her fingers resting lightly on his skin. "I am not going to sell you out now, either," she whispered. "We are in this together." Dominic looked down at her hand on his arm. Then his gaze traveled up to her face. The air shifted again, heavy and electric. The conversation about business and history faded, replaced by the undeniable pull of two people standing alone in the dark. Lila did not move her hand. Dominic turned his body fully toward her. He set his glass down on the railing ledge without looking away from her. "Lila," he breathed. It was a warning and a plea. He leaned in slowly, giving her 1,000 chances to back away. She did not move. She tilted her head back, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Dominic's hand came up, cupping the side of her neck. His thumb brushed her jawline, his skin rough and warm against her softness. Her fingers curled into the cotton of his shirt, gripping him. He lowered his head. Their lips met. It was hesitant at first, a question asked in the dark, but the moment they connected, the hesitation shattered. Dominic groaned low in his throat, a sound of surrender. He slanted his mouth over hers, deepening the kiss. It was intense, overwhelming. The world narrowed down to the taste of whiskey and Dominic. His other hand found her waist, pulling her flush against him. Lila felt her knees weaken, threatening to buckle, and she clung to him, opening to him, swept away by the sheer force of his desire. For a moment, they were not a boss and a maid, or a fake husband and wife. They were just heat and need. Then, Dominic stiffened. He tore his mouth away, gasping for air. He stepped back abruptly, his chest heaving. He looked at her, his eyes wild, dark with dilated pupils. He rasped. Lila stood there, lips swollen, hands still reaching for him, confused and reeling. "I'm sorry," Dominic said, his voice a rough whisper. I went too far. I promised you safety. I cannot—" He ran a hand through his hair, looking furious with himself. "Forgive me," he said. Before Lila could speak, before she could tell him that she did not want to be safe, he turned and strode back into the house, leaving her alone on the balcony with the taste of him still on her lips. The Vale estate sat on the jagged edge of Harborview, a sprawling fortress of stone and manicured ivy that seemed to look down on the rest of the city with aristocratic disdain. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of judgment. Lila stood near the grand fireplace, clutching a flute of sparkling water as if it were a shield. This was the engagement party. It was small, controlled, and populated exclusively by people who could order a hit as easily as they ordered dinner. Dominic stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He had been like this all evening, physically close, projecting a united front, yet emotionally distant ever since their aborted kiss on the balcony 3 nights ago. "This is my cousin, Eva," Dominic said, guiding Lila toward a woman with sharp features and hair cut into a severe, stylish bob. Eva Vale held a wine glass by the stem, her eyes scanning Lila with the precision of a laser grid. She did not smile. "So this is the hidden gem," Eva said, her voice smooth but cool. "We were all quite surprised. Dominic, you are usually so calculated. A whirlwind romance is unlike you." "It was not a whirlwind," Dominic said, his tone warning. "It was inevitable." Eva took a sip of her wine, her gaze never leaving Lila's face. "Welcome to the family. Lila, I hope you have a strong stomach. The Vales are not known for being easy to digest." "Thank you," Lila managed to say. Her voice was steady, though her palms were sweating. "I am learning fast." Eva raised an eyebrow, a flicker of respect passing through her eyes, before she turned to speak to Marco, who was lurking near the buffet table looking miserable. Lila excused herself to find the powder room, needing a moment of silence. As she navigated the hallway, avoiding the gaze of an elderly man with a scar running through his eyebrow, she heard voices drifting from the kitchen service entrance. She stopped. The door was slightly ajar. "I give it 6 months," a female voice said. It was one of the catering staff. "6 months. "You are generous," a male voice scoffed. "She is a maid. For God's sake. She was scrubbing floors at the Regent last week. Now she's wearing silk and pretending she knows which fork to use. It is a joke. Dominic must be losing his mind," the woman replied. "Or maybe he just wanted a toy he could throw away when it breaks. Cinderella stories do not happen in this world." Lila felt the blood rush to her face. The humiliation burned hot and sharp in her chest. She looked down at her hands, manicured and ringless. The ring was coming later, Dominic had said, and felt the phantom sensation of bleach and rough sponges. They were right. She was playing dress-up. But then she remembered Dominic's face in the parking garage. She remembered the way he had looked at her on the balcony, raw and wanting. She straightened her spine. She was not just a maid. She was the woman Dominic Vale had chosen to trust. Even if it was just for a lie, that had to count for something. She pushed the kitchen door open. The two staff members froze, their eyes widening in horror as they realized who was standing there. Lila looked at them calmly. "The appetizers are running low," she said, her voice cool and commanding, echoing the tone Dominic used with his men. "I suggest you focus on your jobs rather than my biography." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding, but her head held high. The next day, the suffocating atmosphere of the estate became too much. Dominic found Lila in the library, staring blankly at a wall of leather-bound books she was too nervous to touch. "Get your coat," he said. "Where are we going?" Lila asked, startled. "Somewhere real," Dominic replied. They took the silver coupe, Dominic driving himself, leaving the security detail in a trailing vehicle. He drove them out of the wealthy hills and down into the old quarter, a neighborhood of brick row houses, laundry lines, and the smell of roasting garlic. He parked in front of a small corner cafe with a faded awning that read, "Sal's. This place has been here for 50 years, Dominic said, killing the engine. "It is the only place in the city where I am not the boss. Inside." The cafe was warm and noisy. An older man with a stained apron and a face like a crumpled paper bag looked up from the espresso machine. His face split into a grin. "Dom," the man shouted, throwing up his hands. "You finally came back to see your Uncle Sal." Dominic actually smiled. It was not the guarded, polite smile he wore for business, but a real, boyish expression that transformed his face. "Hello?" "Sal," Dominic said, walking over to embrace the old man. Sal slapped Dominic's cheek affectionately. "You look skinny. You're working too much. And who is this?" He looked at Lila. "This is Lila," Dominic said. "My fiancé." Sal's eyes went wide. He wiped his hands on his apron and reached over the counter to take Lila's hand. "Beautiful," Sal declared. "Too good for you, Dom. Definitely too good. Sit, sit. I will bring the special." They sat at a small, wobbly table in the back for the next hour. Lila watched a version of Dominic she did not know existed. He laughed at Sal's jokes. He ate a cannoli with his fingers. He told her stories about playing stickball in the alley behind the shop, about scraping his knees and hiding from his mother. Lila relaxed, the tension of the last few days melting away. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand, listening to him speak. "You were a troublemaker," she teased. "I was resourceful," Dominic corrected, a glint of humor in his eyes. Under the small table, his knee brushed against hers. He did not pull away. The contact was warm, constant, a silent tether between them. Lila felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. Here, in this noisy cafe, stripped of the suits and the guns and the expectations, he was just a man, and she was just a woman who liked the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. It was nice to just be normal, she said softly. Dominic's smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of intense longing. "Yes," he said, "it is." The sun was setting as they drove back toward the estate. The sky was a bruised purple, casting long shadows across the highway. Dominic was quiet, his hand resting loosely on the gear stick. Lila watched the city blur past, feeling a lingering warmth from the afternoon. "We should go back there," she said. "Sal really likes you. He likes anyone who tips in cash," Dominic said, though his tone was fond. Suddenly, a black SUV swerved out of the side lane, cutting directly in front of them. Dominic slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, the smell of burnt rubber filling the cabin. "What is—" Lila started. "Get down!" Dominic roared. Before she could process the command, the rear window of the SUV shattered outward. Muzzle flashes lit up the twilight. Pop, pop, pop. The sounds were dry, cracking noises. The windshield of their coupe spiderwebbed instantly. Dominic unbuckled his seatbelt in a blur of motion. He threw his body across the center console, shoving Lila down toward the floorboard. "Stay down," he yelled, covering her with his own bulk. Glass rained down on them. A bullet punched through the side window, embedding itself in the leather headrest where Lila's head had been a second ago. Lila screamed, a raw sound of terror that was lost in the noise of the engine revving. Dominic was heavy on top of her, a solid wall of muscle and heat. She could feel his heart hammering against her shoulder. His breath was ragged against her ear. "Hold on," he gritted out. He reached blindly for the steering wheel with one hand, keeping the rest of his body over her. He slammed the car into reverse, the tires spinning on the asphalt, the car fishtailed violently. More shots rang out. Metal pinged as bullets struck the car door. The security detail behind them had engaged. Lila heard the roar of other engines, the sound of return fire. Dominic spun the wheel, swinging the coupe around in a screeching J-turn, and floored the accelerator, speeding away from the ambush in the wrong direction of traffic. Lila was curled in a ball in the footwell, her hands over her head, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Dominic did not move off her until they were several miles away, weaving through side streets at breakneck speed, only when silence returned, broken only by the wind rushing through the shattered windows. Did Dominic sit up? "Lila," he demanded, his voice tight with panic. "Lila, talk to me. I'm okay," she gasped, pulling herself up onto the seat. "I am okay." Dominic pulled the car onto a deserted industrial access road and slammed it into park. He turned to her, his eyes wild. He grabbed her face in his hands, tilting her head from side to side, checking her frantically. "Is there blood? Are you hit? Look at me. I am fine." "Dominic," Lila cried, though she was trembling uncontrollably, "it is just glass. Just glass." He ran his hands down her arms, checking for hidden wounds. When he found none, he let out a sound that was half sob, half growl. He grabbed the lapels of her coat and pulled her forward, burying his face in her neck. He hugged her so tightly it hurt. His arms were iron bands around her, crushing her to his chest. Lila could feel the tremors running through his body. He was terrified. The big, bad Mafia boss was shaking. "I have you," he murmured into her hair. "I have you. You are safe." Lila wrapped her arms around his waist, clutching the back of his shirt. She buried her face in his shoulder, inhaling the scent of him. Smoke, fear, and cologne. They stayed like that for a long time. Two survivors clinging to each other in a shattered car on the side of a dark road. By the time they reached the estate, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. The security team swarmed the car as they pulled into the driveway. Dominic was out instantly, barking orders. "Find out who it was," he roared at Marco, his face a mask of fury. They knew the route. They knew the car. Someone talked. "Tear the city apart until you find them." He did not wait for an answer. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Lila. He did not let her walk. He scooped her up into his arms, carrying her bridal style into the house as if she were made of porcelain. He carried her straight up to her room and set her down on the edge of the bed. "I will get the doctor," he said, turning to leave. "No!" Lila shouted. Dominic stopped. "No doctor," Lila said, her voice cracking. "I do not want strangers touching me. I just want it to stop." She curled her legs up to her chest, wrapping her arms around her knees. The tears she had been holding back finally broke. She began to sob. Great heaving breaths that shook her small frame. "I cannot do this. Dominic," she wept. "I am scared of guns. I am scared of blood. I am a maid. I clean rooms. I am not built for this war." Dominic closed the door softly. He walked back to the bed and sat down beside her. He did not try to hush her. He just sat there, his shoulder pressed firmly against hers, offering his solid presence as an anchor. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." "Lila," he reached out and took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "I promised you safety," he said, his voice heavy with guilt, "and I failed. Today. I failed. You saved me." Lila sniffled, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "You covered me. You could have been shot. I would take 1,000 bullets before I let one touch you," Dominic said. The conviction in his tone was absolute. Lila turned to look at him. His face was streaked with soot from the car, a small cut on his cheekbone oozing blood. He looked weary, battered, and devastatingly human. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care so much? It is just a deal." Dominic looked at her, his gray eyes searching hers. "It stopped being a deal a long time ago. Lila." The confession hung in the air. Lila's heart skipped a beat. She looked at his lips, then back to his eyes. The fear of the ambush was still humming in her blood, making everything feel heightened, urgent. She needed to feel alive. She needed to feel him. She moved her hand from his grip and slid it up his arm, over his shoulder, until her fingers tangled in the short hair at the nape of his neck. "Lila," he whispered. A question. She did not answer with words. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. This time, she initiated it. Dominic froze for a split second. Then he broke. He made a low sound in his throat and turned fully toward her. His hands settled firmly on her waist, pulling her across the mattress until she was pressed against him. The kiss was not hesitant like the one on the balcony. It was desperate. It tasted of survival. Dominic's mouth moved over hers with restrained urgency, his tongue sweeping against her lower lip. Lila opened to him, her hands clutching his shirt, pulling him closer, needing to erase the space between them. He deepened the kiss, one hand moving up to cup the back of her head, angling her for better access. Lila felt a fire ignite in her belly, burning away the cold terror of the last hour. She arched into him, a soft moan escaping her throat. For a minute, the world was perfect. Then, Dominic pulled back. He did not go far, just an inch. His forehead rested against hers, his breathing harsh and labored. His hands tightened on her waist, then slowly relaxed. "No," he rasped. Lila blinked, dazed. "Dominic, I cannot do this," he said, his voice strained. "Not like this. Not when you are shaken and scared and running on adrenaline." He pulled away further, sitting up straight, creating distance. "You are vulnerable right now. Lila, if I take this, if I take you, you might hate me in the morning. You might feel like you owed me something for saving you. I do not want your gratitude, and I do not want you to feel trapped by obligation." Lila stared at him, her lips swollen, her heart aching. He was being noble, he was being good, and it was infuriating. "I do not feel trapped," she whispered. "You should," Dominic said grimly. He stood up, pacing to the window. An hour later, after Lila had washed her face and changed into fresh clothes, Dominic returned. He had cleaned up as well. The soot gone, the cut on his cheek bandaged, he held a small velvet box in his hand. He walked over to where she was sitting on the chaise lounge. "I have been working on something," he said, "since the incident in the parking garage. I was going to give it to you later, but after today, I need you to have it now." He opened the box. Inside lay a delicate silver chain with a small, sleek metallic charm shaped like a teardrop. It looked like a piece of modern jewelry, elegant and unassuming. "It is a tracker," Dominic explained. "Military grade. It has a panic button embedded in the center. If you press it, or if it detects a sudden drop in your vitals, it sends a signal directly to my phone and to my head of security. It works even if you are underground, even if you are shielded." He took the necklace out of the box, the silver glinting in the lamplight. "If you wear this, I can find you anywhere, no matter what happens." He stepped toward her, holding the device out. Lila looked at the small metal object, then up at Dominic's intense face. Her mind, still slightly scrambled from the stress, jumped to a horrifying conclusion. She recalled spy movies where trackers were injected under the skin. "Wait," she blurted out, eyes widening in panic. "Are you going to put that in me?" She froze as soon as the words left her mouth. The double entendre hung in the silent room, massive and unmistakable. Dominic stopped. He stared at her. Lila's face turned a violent shade of scarlet. I thought like a chip, like a dog chip. Not the other thing. Oh my God." Dominic's lips twitched. Then he laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and rich, rumbling from his chest. His eyes crinkled at the corners, the tension that had held his shoulders rigid all night finally snapping. "No. Lila," he said, chuckling, "I am not going to put anything in you. It is a necklace. See?" He held up the clasp. Lila buried her face in her hands, mortified. "I am so embarrassed. Please forget I said that." Dominic stepped closer, his amusement softening into affection. "Never," he said. He moved her hands away from her face gently. "Turn around," he instructed softly. Lila turned, lifting her hair off her neck. Dominic stepped behind her. She could feel his warmth against her back. He brought the chain around her neck. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin at the hollow of her throat, lingering there for a moment longer than necessary. He fastened the clasp with a click. "I would never force anything on your body. Lila," he murmured, his voice low and warm near her ear, "or your life. Everything is your choice. Even the tracking. If you take it off, I will not stop you, but I sleep better knowing it is there." Lila touched the cool metal of the charm at her throat. She leaned back slightly, just enough to rest against his chest for a fleeting second. "I will keep it on," she whispered. Dominic placed a chaste kiss on the top of her head. "Good. Now try to sleep. I will be outside your door all night." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. He looked back at her, a small smile still playing on his lips. "And Lila? Yes? Nice try with the joke." He winked, actually winked, and closed the door, leaving Lila blushing, smiling, and feeling safer than she had in her entire life. The flashes of the cameras were blinding, a relentless staccato of white light that left spots dancing in Lila Moreno's vision. She stood on the grand staircase of the Harborview Cultural Center, her hand tucked into the crook of Dominic Vale's arm. She was wearing a gown of emerald green silk that Dominic's stylist had sworn would make her look regal, but right now, she felt like a deer caught in the headlights of a dozen semi-trucks. "Smile," Dominic murmured, his lips barely moving. Lila forced the corners of her mouth up. It felt brittle, like cracked porcelain. "I am smiling," she whispered back through her teeth. "I'm terrified I am going to trip." "I have you," Dominic said. His voice was a low rumble, invisible to the press but grounding to her. His hand rested at the small of her back, the heat of his palm seeping through the silk. It was steady, unshakable. It was the only thing keeping her upright. They descended the stairs, the center of attention for the entire city's elite. The engagement had been announced in the morning papers, accompanied by the photos they had taken at the townhouse. Now, this was the debut. The charity gala for the Harborview Arts Initiative was the perfect stage, neutral ground where money washed away sins. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, a reporter thrust a microphone toward them. "Mr. Vale, is it true you met your fiancée while she was working at one of your properties?" Dominic stopped. He turned to the reporter with a smile that was charming but didn't quite reach his eyes. "It is true," Dominic said smoothly. "Lila is the hardest working woman I have ever met. She stole my heart before I even knew it was missing." The reporters cooed. Lila felt a flush rise up her neck, partly from the lie, and partly because the way he said it sounded confusingly sincere. She looked up at him, and for a second, the mask slipped. He looked down at her not as a prop, but with that same intensity he had shown in the car after the shooting. Then the moment broke. "Well, isn't this a picture of domestic bliss?" The voice was smooth, oily, and carried a subtle undercurrent of mockery. Dominic stiffened instantly. His hand on Lila's back didn't move, but his fingers tightened, digging slightly into her waist. Lila turned. Standing before them was a man who looked like he had been cut from a magazine advertisement for expensive yachts. He was tan, with slicked-back dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He held a glass of champagne as if it were a weapon. "Luca," Dominic said. His tone was polite, but the temperature between the two men dropped to freezing. Luca Corvetti took a step closer, invading their personal space. He looked Lila up and down, his gaze lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. "And you must be the lucky lady," Luca said, "from housekeeping to the head of the table." "That is quite a climb, my dear." Lila met his gaze. This was the man who wanted Dominic dead. This was the man responsible for the bullets that had shattered their windows 3 days ago. Fear spiked in her chest, cold and sharp, but she remembered Dominic's lessons. "Walk like you own the floorboards. I am very lucky," Lila said, her voice steady. "Dominic is a good man." Luca laughed, a short, barking sound. "A good man. That is rich." He looked at Dominic, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You are softening. Dom, I never thought I would see the day you settled down. A wife makes you vulnerable. It gives you something to lose. Be careful. In our world, soft things get crushed." Dominic shifted. He moved his body subtly, placing his shoulder between Luca and Lila, effectively shielding her from the other man's line of sight. It was a primal, possessive move. "I am not worried, Luca," Dominic said softly. His voice was devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "Because unlike you, I know the difference between something to lose and something worth fighting for. Enjoy the party. I hear the shrimp is excellent." Dominic steered Lila away, his grip on her waist firm. He did not look back, but Lila could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. He was vibrating with suppressed violence. "Don't look back," Dominic instructed quietly. "He threatened you," Lila whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He just threatened us in the middle of a ballroom." "He's posturing," Dominic said, though his jaw was set so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. "He's trying to see if I will crack." They spent the rest of the evening circulating, shaking hands, and making small talk with the mayor and the police commissioner. To the outside world, they were the golden couple. But Lila could feel the danger lurking in every shadow, the weight of Luca's eyes on them from across the room. She felt like a canary in a coal mine, waiting for the air to run out. The ride back to the estate was silent. The air in the car was thick, suffocating. Dominic stared out the window, his hand clenched into a fist on his thigh. When they walked through the front doors of the townhouse, the silence shattered. "That was insane," Lila said, throwing her clutch onto the entry table. Her hands were shaking again, the adrenaline of the performance wearing off. "He was right there. Dominic, the man who tried to kill us, and we just drank champagne?" Dominic turned to her, tearing off his bow tie and unbuttoning his collar. "It is politics. Lila, I cannot shoot him in front of the mayor." "You said I would be safe," Lila shouted, the fear finally boiling over into anger. "You said if I married you, if I wore the ring and played the part, I would be untouchable." But he looked at me like I was a target practice dummy. "He will not touch you," Dominic snapped, his voice rising. "How do you know?" Lila demanded. She stepped toward him, fueled by the terrifying reality of her new life. "You are using me, Dominic. That is all this is. I am just a shield. You put me out there so he would look at me instead of you. You are dangling me in front of a shark to see if he bites." Dominic flinched. The accusation seemed to hit him physically. He stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression twisting with genuine hurt. "Is that what you think?" he asked. His voice dropped, rough and raw. "You think I see you as bait?" "Yes," Lila cried, though tears were stinging her eyes. "What else am I supposed to think? You dragged me into this world. You put a target on my back, and tonight you let him get close enough to smell my perfume." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with the electricity of two people standing on a precipice. Dominic stepped forward. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Lila held her ground, breathing hard, waiting for him to yell, to argue, to be the boss. Instead, he reached out. He brought his hand up to her face, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. His skin was warm, his touch startlingly tender after the violence of their argument. "I would burn this city to the ground before I let him hurt you," Dominic whispered. Lila looked up at him, her breath hitching. The anger in his gray eyes had vanished, replaced by a dark, consuming fire that terrified her for an entirely different reason. "I do not use you, Lila," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "That is the problem. I care about you. I care about you more than is safe, more than I should. You are not a shield. You are the only thing that makes me want to survive this." Lila stared at him, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw the truth in his eyes, the vulnerability he hid from the world. He was terrified of losing her. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a surge of desire so sharp it made her knees weak. She didn't think, she just reacted. She reached out and grabbed the lapels of his shirt, bunching the fabric in her fists, and pulled him down. Dominic didn't resist. He crashed into her. His mouth found hers in a fierce, desperate kiss that tasted of fear and champagne. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision. Lila made a sound in her throat, a soft whimper of need, and Dominic groaned. wrapping his arms around her waist and lifting her slightly off the floor. They stumbled back, hitting the wall of the hallway with a thud. A painting rattled on its hook. Dominic braced his hands on the wall on either side of her head, caging her in, his body pressing hers into the plaster. Lila arched into him, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her fear and confusion into the contact. She needed to feel him, solid and real, to prove that they were both still alive. Dominic's hands left the wall and roamed down her back, gripping her hips, pulling her flush against him. His forehead rested against hers as he broke the kiss to gasp for air, only to dive back in a second later, his lips moving to her jaw, her neck, the sensitive spot behind her ear. "Lila," he groaned against her skin. "Lila." It felt real. It felt reckless. For the first time, Lila wasn't pretending. She wasn't the maid or the fake fiancé. She was just a woman burning for this man. Then, just as her hands moved to the buttons of his shirt, Dominic froze. He went rigid against her. His breathing was ragged, harsh in the quiet hallway. He pulled his head back, his eyes dark and blown wide, staring at her face. He looked like a man at war with himself. "Dominic?" Lila whispered, her lips swollen, her body aching for him to continue. He closed his eyes for a second, a look of pain crossing his features. Then he stepped back. He put 2 feet of distance between them, his hands shaking as he adjusted his shirt. "We cannot," he rasped. Lila felt cold air rush into the space where he had been. She blinked, confused and hurt. "What?" "We cannot do this," Dominic said, his voice gaining a hard edge of restraint. "You are upset. You are scared. I told you I would not take advantage of this situation. I meant it." Lila straightened her dress. Feeling humiliated. "It is not the situation, Dominic. I wanted this." "You think you do," Dominic said, refusing to look at her. "But tomorrow, when the fear fades, you will see it for what it is. I will not let you make a mistake you will regret. We need to slow down." He turned away, his shoulders stiff. "Go to bed, Lila, please." Lila watched him walk away toward his study, the rejection stinging worse than Luca's insults. She felt foolish, cheap. She had thrown herself at him, and he had pushed her away. She turned and ran up the stairs, locking her bedroom door behind her. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. She remembered the heat of his mouth, but more than that, she remembered his hands. They had trembled. He had shaken as he pulled away. He hadn't stopped because he didn't want her. He had stopped because he was holding himself back. The next morning, the house was quiet. Dominic was gone before Lila came down for breakfast. She sat alone at the long dining table, picking at a piece of toast. "Lila," she looked up. Eva was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her usual armor of high fashion. She was in yoga pants and a sweatshirt, holding a mug of coffee. She looked tired. "Can I sit?" Eva asked. Lila nodded. Eva sat across from her, wrapping her hands around the mug. "I saw the photos from the gala," Eva said quietly. "You did good. You held your own against Luca. Most people crumble when he looks at them." "He is a monster," Lila said. "Yes," Eva agreed. "He is. And he is winning." Lila frowned. "What do you mean?" Eva glanced at the door to ensure they were alone, then leaned in. "Dominic would never tell you this. He tries to protect everyone, but there is a leak. Lila, a bad one. The ambush on the road, the breach at the hotel. Someone inside the organization is feeding information to Luca. Someone close to Dominic." Lila felt a chill. Dominic had mentioned a traitor that first night, but she thought he had handled it. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to know what you are walking into," Eva said grimly. "Dominic is getting desperate. He's bringing you out in public, making you a target. I think he's trying to flush the rat out. He's making so much noise with this engagement that the traitor will have to make a move." Lila sat back, the toast turning to ash in her mouth. "So I was right," she whispered. "I am bait." Eva sighed. "He loves you. Lila, I can see it. But Dominic is a strategist first. He will use whatever pieces he has to win the war, even if it breaks his heart. Just watch your back." Eva finished her coffee and left, leaving Lila alone with a fresh wave of doubt. Was the tenderness last night real? Or was it just another way to keep the bait compliant? The day dragged on. Dominic texted her at 6 in the evening. Late meeting with the capos, trying to trace the leak, lock the doors. I will be home by midnight. Lila ate dinner in her room. The house felt too big, too empty. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch longer than usual. At 10 o'clock, she was sitting on her bed, reading a book she couldn't concentrate on. Her hand drifted up to the silver teardrop charm around her neck. She held it, seeking the comfort Dominic had promised. It was warm against her skin. She looked down at it. Usually, there was a tiny pinprick pulse of green light on the back of the charm, indicating it was active and connected to the network. The light was off. Lila frowned. She tapped the charm. Nothing. She flipped it over. The metal was cold now, lifeless. She stood up. A prickle of dread walking up her spine. She walked to her window and looked out at the grounds. The floodlights that usually illuminated the perimeter wall were dark. That wasn't right. The estate had a backup generator. The lights never went out. She grabbed her phone to call Dominic. No service. The words on the screen mocked her. The Wi-Fi signal was gone too. Someone was jamming the signals. Lila's breath hitched. She backed away from the window. Lock the doors, Dominic had said. She ran to her bedroom door and threw the deadbolt. Then she pushed a heavy armchair in front of it. Downstairs, glass shattered. Lila froze. The sound echoed through the silent house, followed by the heavy thud of boots on the marble floor. No alarm sounded. The silence was absolute and terrifying. "Check the upstairs," a muffled voice commanded. Lila scrambled backward, looking for a weapon. She grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, ripping the cord from the wall. She retreated to the bathroom, locking that door too, and huddled in the shower stall, clutching the lamp like a lifeline. She heard the bedroom door handle jiggle, then a loud kick. Wood splintered. The armchair scraped across the floor as the door was shoved open. "Check the bathroom," the voice said. Lila held her breath, tears streaming down her face. She pressed the panic button on her necklace, praying, pressing it over and over again. But the light stayed dark. The bathroom door exploded inward with a single, powerful kick. 2 men in black tactical gear and ski masks filled the small space. Lila swung the lamp with a scream, connecting with the shoulder of the first man. He grunted but didn't fall. He grabbed her arm, twisting it until she dropped the weapon. "Get off me," Lila screamed, kicking and clawing. "Dominic, shut her up," the second man said. A heavy gloved hand clamped over her mouth. Lila was lifted off her feet, thrashing uselessly against the brute strength of the intruder. They hauled her out of the room, down the stairs, and through the shattered back door. A nondescript white van was waiting in the driveway, engine running. They shoved her into the back. It smelled of grease and old metal. Lila scrambled to the doors, but they slammed shut in her face. The lock clicked. As the van peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching, Lila clutched the dead tracker in her hand. "If you wear this, I can find you anywhere." The van hit a pothole, jarring her bones. They were taking her away. The signal was dead. The security was dead. Dominic didn't know where she was. For the first time since this nightmare began, Lila Moreno was truly, completely alone. And in the darkness of the van, she wondered if the man who claimed to care too much would even know where to start looking. Lila Moreno woke to the smell of salt water and rotting wood. Her head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that matched the pounding of waves against pilings somewhere below her. She tried to move her hands to rub her temples, but they were arrested by rough hemp rope. Her wrists were bound tightly to the arms of a metal chair. She blinked her eyes open, the grit of the dirty floor still stinging her vision. She was in a warehouse. It was cavernous and dim, lit only by a few hanging industrial bulbs that cast long, swinging shadows across the concrete floor. Dust motes danced in the yellow light. "Good evening, Sleeping Beauty." Lila snapped her head up. Standing in front of her, leaning casually against a wooden crate, was Luca Corvetti. He was still wearing his tuxedo from the gala. Though the jacket was discarded and his sleeves were rolled up, he looked out of place in the grime, a pristine shark swimming in a sewer. "Where is Dominic?" Lila rasped. Her throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. Luca chuckled, pushing off the crate and walking toward her. The sound of his dress shoes clicking on the concrete echoed through the empty space. "Dominic is currently tearing the city apart looking for a ghost," Luca said. "He probably thinks you are already dead. Or worse. He is hoping you are dead so he does not have to deal with the mess." Lila straightened her spine, ignoring the pain in her shoulders. "He will find me." Luca stopped a foot away from her, his expression twisting into a sneer. "You really believe that, do you not? You think this is a fairy tale? The brave knight comes for the princess." He shook his head, pity dripping from his voice. "You are not a princess, Lila. You are a prop. Dominic needed a wife to look stable for the commission. He picked a maid because you were convenient, expendable. Who misses a maid when she disappears? No one." Lila stared at him. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, terrifyingly fast, but his words sparked a fire in her belly that burned hotter than the fear. "He picked me because I am the only one who sees him," she said, her voice shaking but clear. Luca laughed. "He sees you as a shield." "Sweetheart, a meat shield." "No," Lila said, fussa. She surprised herself with the force of her denial. "You do not know him. You think you do because you are both criminals. But you are not the same. You fight for power. You fight because you like the cruelty. Dominic fights because he wants to protect what is his. He fights to survive. That is why he is going to win. And that is why you are going to lose." Luca's smile vanished. His face went flat and cold. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. "We will see who loses when I send him your fingers in a box," he whispered. 5 miles away, the Vale estate was in chaos. Dominic stood in the center of the security room, his face a mask of terrifying calm. The monitors showed the static-filled screens of the perimeter cameras. His hand was clenched around his phone so tightly the screen was beginning to crack. "The tracker is dead," he said. His voice was devoid of inflection. It went dark at 10:15. Eva was at the console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She looked pale, her usual composure shattered. Someone jammed the signal locally, she said, and they looped the camera feed. "This was not a smash and grab. Dom, this was an inside job. They had the codes." Dominic turned slowly. His eyes swept the room, landing on the 3 men standing by the door, his inner circle. "Who?" Dominic asked softly. No one spoke. The air in the room was suffocating. Eva hit a key. "I pulled the manual access logs from the backup server. It is hardwired, so it cannot be jammed. The side gate was deactivated at 10:12. She looked up at the men, her eyes locking on one figure. The keycard used belonged to Marco. Dominic went still. He turned his gaze to Marco, his right-hand man, the man who had stood beside him at his father's funeral, the man who had eaten at his table every Sunday for 5 years. Marco stood against the wall. He did not deny it. He did not reach for his weapon. He just closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping as if a heavy weight had finally crushed him. "Marco," Dominic said. The name hung in the air like a sentence. "They took Sophia," Marco whispered, his voice breaking. "Luca's men. They took my wife and the kids 3 days ago. They said if I did not lower the shields, they said they would kill them all." Dominic stared at him. He felt a phantom pain in his chest, a cracking sensation. Betrayal usually tasted like bile, but this tasted like ashes. He understood the motivation. God help him. He understood it perfectly, but he also knew what it had cost. "So you gave them Lila," Dominic said. "I did not know they would take her," Marco pleaded, opening his eyes. Tears streamed down his face. "I swear, Dom, they said they just wanted to send a message. They said they would just trash the house. I did not know they were coming for the girl." "You gave them Lila," Dominic repeated, his voice rising to a roar that shook the walls. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed Marco by the throat and slammed him against the wall. Marco did not fight back. He went limp, accepting his fate. Dominic's thumb pressed into Marco's windpipe. He wanted to squeeze. He wanted to crush the life out of the man who had let wolves into the sanctuary. He saw Lila's face, laughing at the cafe, crying in the car, sleeping in the bed he had never touched. She was out there, alone and terrified. Because of this man. Do it, Marco choked out. I deserve it. Dominic's hand trembled. For a long, agonizing second, death hovered in the room. Then, Dominic released him. He stepped back, breathing hard. If I kill you, Dominic said, his voice ice cold, I am no better than Luca. And I need you to talk. He turned to Eva. Lock him up. But first, get everything he knows. Where does Luca take people he wants to break? Marco slid down the wall to the floor, weeping. The old cannery, he gasped. On the east docks, he has a soundproof room in the basement. That is where he took the union rep last year. Dominic looked at him one last time. The friendship was dead. The trust was gone. All that remained was the mission. Get the team. Dominic ordered Eva. We are going to the docks. What about Marco? Eva asked. If Lila is not alive when we get there, Dominic said, walking out the door. Burn him. The drive to the docks was a blur of streetlights and silence. Dominic sat in the passenger seat of the armored SUV, checking his weapon. He ejected the magazine, checked the rounds, and slammed it back in. He did it again and again. The mechanical action was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. He was terrified. He had been shot, stabbed, and beaten. He had faced down death a dozen times, but he had never felt fear like this. It was a cold, sick dread that settled in his gut. Lila was not built for this world. She was soft. She was kind. She was the woman who worried about tuition and apologized for breaking a glass. And he had failed her. We are 3 minutes out, Eva said from the driver's seat. Heat signatures confirm movement in the main warehouse. 5 guards outside. Unknown number inside. We go in hard, Dominic said. No negotiations. No hesitation. Anyone holding a weapon goes down. He looked out the window at the dark water of the harbor passing by. Hold on, Lila, he thought. Just hold on. Back in the warehouse. The psychological torture had begun. Luca had pulled up a chair, sitting backward on it, facing Lila. He held a tablet in his hand. You say he is different, Luca said. You say he is a protector. Let us look at his resume. He swiped the screen and held it up. It was a grainy photo of a man lying in a pool of blood. This was a rival dealer 2 years ago. Luca narrated. Dominic beat him to death with a pipe. He swiped again, a building engulfed in flames. An insurance scam gone wrong. 3 people died in that fire. Dominic gave the order. Lila looked at the images. They were horrific. They were violent. They were undeniable proof of the man Dominic had been. But then she closed her eyes. She saw Dominic in the parking garage, putting his body between her and the attacker. She saw him on the balcony, stopping himself when she would have let him go further. She saw him laughing at her silly joke about the tracker. She saw the way his hand shook when he touched her cheek. Those are pictures, Lila said, opening her eyes. I know the man. Luca's face darkened. He stood up, throwing the tablet onto a nearby table. It clattered loudly in the silence. You are stubborn, he said. It is annoying. He signaled to a man standing in the shadows. The henchman stepped forward. He was holding a small metal case. He opened it, revealing a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Maybe you just need to relax, Luca said smoothly. A little cocktail to loosen your tongue. And maybe your morals. We will record a video for Dominic. We will show him exactly how much his precious wife enjoys my company. Lila's eyes widened. She stared at the needle. It was long, glinting under the yellow lights. The henchman flicked the side of the syringe. A tiny droplet of liquid squirted out. Hold her arm, Luca ordered. The man moved toward her. Lila shrank back against the chair, pulling at the ropes until her wrists bled. Panic, absolute and primal, flooded her system. The room seemed to tilt. No, she gasped. No, please. The man grabbed her bicep, his grip bruising. He brought the needle closer. Lila's breath hitched in a sob. The memory of the bedroom slammed into her, the awkwardness, the laughter, the moment Dominic had put the necklace on her. The words she had said then, so innocent and embarrassed, rose to her lips now. But this time, there was no humor. There was only terror. "Wait," she cried out, her voice thin and high. "Wait, are you going to put that in me?" The echo of the question hung in the air, twisted and horrific. Luca laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "Oh, honey," he sneered, "that is just the beginning." Suddenly, the metal door at the far end of the warehouse exploded inward. The boom was deafening. Smoke billowed into the room. Luca spun around, reaching for the gun tucked in his waistband. Dominic Vale emerged from the smoke. He moved with a speed that defied his size. He did not yell. He did not pause. He raised his weapon and fired 2 shots in rapid succession. The 2 guards by the door dropped before they could even raise their rifles. "Dominic!" Luca shouted, scrambling for cover behind a stack of pallets. Dominic ignored him. His eyes were locked on the man holding the needle to Lila's arm. The henchman froze, the syringe hovering inches from Lila's skin. "Drop it," Dominic said. His voice was not loud, but it carried across the warehouse like a thunderclap. The henchman hesitated, his eyes darting between Dominic and Luca. It was a fatal mistake. Dominic fired. The bullet struck the man's shoulder, spinning him around. The syringe flew from his hand, shattering on the concrete floor. Lila screamed as the man fell back, writhing in pain. Dominic holstered his gun and sprinted across the open floor. Bullets began to fly from the pallets where Luca was hiding. Pinging off the metal chair Lila was tied to, Dominic did not stop. He did not take cover. He threw himself forward, sliding on his knees the last few feet to reach her. He shielded her body with his own, crouching over her as shots whizzed overhead. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands frantic as he pulled a knife from his boot. "Did they touch you?" "No," Lila sobbed, burying her face in his jacket. "No, I am okay. You came. I told you I would find you," Dominic gritted out. He slashed the ropes binding her wrists, then her ankles. "Can you run?" he asked, grabbing her face to look into her eyes. "Yes." She nodded, though she was shaking uncontrollably. Dominic pulled her to her feet. He kept one arm wrapped tightly around her waist, pressing her into his side. He raised his gun with his free hand, firing blindly toward Luca's position to keep his head down. "Move," Dominic roared. They ran. They sprinted toward the blown-open door. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of cordite. Lila stumbled, her legs numb from being tied up, but Dominic practically carried her, his strength unyielding. More of Dominic's men were pouring into the warehouse now, engaging Luca's remaining guards. The sound of automatic fire was deafening. Just as they reached the exit, Luca popped up from behind a crate. His face was bloodied, his eyes wild with rage. He raised his gun, aiming directly at Lila's back. Dominic saw the movement out of the corner of his eye. He did not think. He spun Lila around, throwing her out the door and into the night air, while simultaneously turning his body to face the threat. A shot rang out. Dominic grunted, a sharp exhalation of breath. He stumbled, his hand going to his side. "Dominic!" Lila screamed, reaching for him. He grabbed her hand, his grip crushing. "Go!" He shouted, "To the car!" He did not fall. He fired back. 3 controlled shots that sent Luca diving for cover again, clutching his leg. Dominic dragged Lila through the maze of shipping containers outside. The night air was cold and clean compared to the warehouse. Eva pulled the armored SUV up to the curb, the tires screeching. The back door flew open. Dominic shoved Lila inside and dove in after her. "Go!" Dominic yelled. Eva floored the gas. The SUV tore away from the dock, speeding into the darkness of the industrial district. Inside the car, silence fell, heavy and sudden. Lila scrambled across the seat. Dominic was leaning back against the leather, his face pale. His hand was pressed to his left side, blood seeping through his fingers, staining his white shirt dark red. "You are shot," Lila gasped, her hands hovering over the wound, terrified to touch it. "Grazed." Dominic wheezed. He winced, shifting his position. "It is just a flesh wound. Ribs might be cracked, but I am fine." He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the rope burns on her wrists, the terror still haunting her eyes. He reached out with his bloody hand and cupped her cheek, smearing a streak of crimson on her skin. "I am sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry, Lila. I let them take you." Lila shook her head, tears spilling over again. She grabbed his hand, pressing it against her face. "You came for me," she sobbed. "You came." She collapsed against his chest, careful of his wound. Dominic's arm came around her, holding her with a ferocity that bordered on painful. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her, reassuring himself that she was real, that she was warm, that she was alive. "I have you," he murmured, rocking her slightly as the car sped through the night. "I have you." Lila clung to him, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath her ear. She knew the war was not over. Luca was alive. He was wounded, angry, and dangerous. But as she lay in Dominic's arms, speeding away from the nightmare, she knew one thing for certain. She was not just a maid anymore, and he was not just a boss. They were two people who had walked through fire for each other, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Dominic looked out the window at the passing city lights. His jaw set. He tightened his grip on Lila's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The final battle was coming. He could feel it. But this time, he wasn't fighting for territory. He was fighting for her, and for that, he would burn the whole world down. The safe house was a small, weather-beaten cabin tucked into the dense tree line 20 miles north of Harborview. It smelled of pine needles and dust, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of the penthouse or the rotting dampness of the docks. Outside, the wind howled through the branches, but inside, the silence was heavy and intimate. Lila sat on the edge of the narrow bed, her hands resting in her lap. The adrenaline that had fueled her escape was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. Dominic pulled a wooden chair close to her, sitting so their knees brushed. He had a first aid kit open on the nightstand. "Give me your hands," Dominic said softly. Lila extended her arms. Her wrists were raw, angry red lines circling her pale skin where the ropes had dug in. Dominic squeezed a dab of antiseptic ointment onto a sterile pad. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, his eyes flickering to her face to gauge her reaction, before he gently dabbed the cool cream onto her skin. He worked with a focus that was almost religious. His large hands, usually so capable of violence, were incredibly gentle. He wrapped a clean bandage around her left wrist, smoothing the tape down with his thumb. "You are hurt too," Lila whispered, looking at the dark stain on the side of his shirt where the bullet had grazed him. "You should be tending to yourself." "It is nothing," Dominic murmured, moving to her other wrist. "I have had worse shaving cuts. This is what matters." He finished the bandage and did not let go of her hand. He held it in both of his own, his thumb rubbing slow, soothing circles over her knuckles. He looked at the bandage as if it were a personal failure. Lila watched him. She saw the lines of fatigue etched around his eyes, the soot still smudged on his jawline. She felt a swelling in her chest that was painful and terrifyingly real. "Dominic," she said. Her voice was steady in the quiet room. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "Did you plan it?" she asked. "From the beginning? Was I just bait to flush out the traitor? Was the marriage, the photos, the public dates? Was it all just a strategy to make Luca attack?" Dominic went still. He could have lied. He could have given her a comforting half-truth. But he looked at the woman who had just survived a kidnapping for him, and he knew he owed her nothing but the absolute truth. "Yes," he said. His voice was rough, scraping against the silence. Lila felt a cold stone drop in her stomach, but she did not pull her hand away. She waited. "At first," Dominic continued, his eyes not wavering, "when I saw you in the hotel room, I saw a loose end. Then, when I offered you the deal, I saw a shield. I knew there was a leak. I knew if I made a big show of a weakness, a new wife, a civilian, the traitor would try to exploit it. I put you in the light so the rats would come out of the shadows." He took a breath, his grip on her hand tightening slightly, but the strategy fell apart. "Lila." "It fell apart the night on the balcony. It fell apart when you made me laugh in the bedroom. Somewhere along the way, I stopped looking at the board and started looking at you." He leaned forward, his intensity burning through the space between them. "I fell for your courage. Most men in my world would have broken in that chair tonight. You stood up to Luca. I fell for your honesty. And I fell for the way you look at me. You do not see a boss or a monster. You see a man, and that terrified me more than any gun. Lila let out a shaky breath, tears pricking her eyes. She looked at this powerful, dangerous man who was on his knees before her, confessing his sins. I love you, she whispered. Dominic froze. His eyes widened slightly, the gray depths swirling with emotion. I love you, she repeated, the words tumbling out now that the dam had broken. I hated you at first. I was so scared. But then you saved me. You listened to me. But Dominic... She pulled her hand free to cup his face, her fingers tracing the rough stubble on his jaw. I am terrified. I cannot live like this. I cannot wonder every time you leave the house if you are coming back in a body bag. I cannot be the reason you get killed because you are too busy protecting me. Dominic turned his face into her palm, kissing the center of her hand. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch as if it were the only anchor in a storm. You will not have to, he promised, his voice low and fierce. I am going to end it. Tonight changed everything. I am finding a way out. Lila, for both of us. He opened his eyes and looked at her. The air in the room shifted. It was no longer about survival or strategy. It was about the two of them, stripped bare of their defenses. Dominic rose slightly from the chair and moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Lila shifted, positioning herself between his spread knees. He reached up and cradled her face in both hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. He leaned his forehead against hers. They breathed the same air, sharing the quiet intimacy of simply being alive. I have you, he whispered, echoing the words he had said in the car. Lila closed her eyes and leaned into him. Her hands slid up his chest, feeling the solid beat of his heart through his shirt, moving up to grip his broad shoulders. Kiss me, she breathed. Dominic did not hesitate. He tilted her head back and pressed his lips to hers. It was not a frantic clash like the hallway. It was slow. It was reverent. It was a kiss that tasted of vows spoken in the dark. Dominic's mouth moved over hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He kissed her as if she were precious, breakable, and utterly essential. Lila opened to him, her fingers curling into the hair at the nape of his neck. She felt his hands slide down to her waist, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. The kiss deepened, becoming a slow burn that warmed the cold places inside her. It was a promise. It was a goodbye to the past and a plea for the future. For a long time, the world outside did not exist. There was only the warmth of his skin, the scent of pine and musk, and the silent, heavy language of their bodies, saying what words could not. The spell was broken by the sharp buzz of a phone on the bedside table. Dominic pulled back, reluctantly breaking the kiss. He rested his forehead against hers for one last second, stabilizing himself, before he reached for the device. He read the message, and his face hardened. The lover vanished, and the warlord returned. It is Eva, he said. Standing up, his voice was clipped, businesslike. Luca has regrouped. He is desperate. He is taking his remaining men to the main distribution warehouse in the industrial district. He plans to torch it. He wants to draw me out. He is setting a trap, Lila said, standing up as well. Yes, Dominic said. He knows I cannot let him burn our infrastructure. He's waiting for me. Dominic checked his weapon, sliding it back into the holster. Stay here. I will leave 2 men outside. Do not open the door. No, Lila said. Dominic turned, surprised. No, I am coming with you, she said firmly. Absolutely not, Dominic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It is a war zone. Lila, you are staying here where it is safe. There is no safe, Lila argued, stepping toward him. You said the safe house was secure, and look what happened. You said the hotel was secure. If I stay here and you do not come back, I will never know. I will be waiting in the dark again. She grabbed his arm. I am not the girl hiding behind the door anymore. Dominic, I am your partner. You said it yourself. If you are going to end this, we end it together. I want to stand by your side." Dominic looked down at her. He saw the steel in her spine, the same defiance that had faced down Luca Corvetti. He realized, with a jolt, that she was right. Leaving her behind was no longer an option. She was part of him now. "Okay," he said, exhaling sharply, "but you listen to me. You follow every order I give. If I tell you to duck, you duck. If I tell you to run, you run. You stay behind cover, do you understand?" "I understand," Lila said, nodding. Dominic grabbed a Kevlar vest from the bag Eva had packed. "Put this on." The main Vale warehouse was a massive structure of corrugated steel and shadows. Dominic, Eva, and a dozen loyal enforcers moved through the perimeter like ghosts. Lila stayed close to Dominic, her heart hammering against her ribs, the weight of the vest heavy on her shoulders. Eva signaled from the rooftop. "Heat signatures inside. They are rigging the fuel tanks." Dominic signaled his men. They fanned out, surrounding the entrances. Dominic led Lila to a stack of heavy crates near the side entrance. "Stay here," he whispered, his lips brushing her ear. "Do not move until I come for you." Lila nodded, crouching down in the shadows. She watched as Dominic moved into the light, his gun drawn. "Corvetti!" Dominic's voice boomed through the empty space. Movement erupted in the center of the warehouse. Luca and 5 of his men spun around. They were holding gas cans and lighters. "You came!" Luca shouted, his voice echoing. "I knew you could not resist saving your precious money." "I am not here for the money," Dominic said calmly, walking into the open. "I am here to take out the trash." Gunfire erupted. Lila covered her ears, pressing herself into the floor. The sound was deafening, a chaotic symphony of cracking shots and shouting men. She watched through a gap in the crates. Dominic moved with terrifying efficiency, firing and moving, taking cover behind pillars. Eva's sniper fire from the catwalks above took down 2 of Luca's men instantly. It was a rout. Luca's men were disorganized, demoralized. They fell back, dropping their weapons, but Luca was not fleeing. He was waiting. As Dominic moved forward to secure the area, Luca emerged from behind a forklift. He wasn't aiming at Dominic, he was holding a detonator. "Drop the gun." "Dom!" Luca screamed. "Or we all burn." Dominic froze. He lowered his weapon slowly. "The warehouse is rigged." Luca spat, blood dripping from his leg where Dominic had shot him earlier. "One click, and this whole place goes up." Dominic stood his ground. "You will die too." "Luca, I have nothing left," Luca screamed, his eyes manic. "You took my territory. You took my reputation. If I go to hell, I am taking you with me." Lila watched, her heart stopping. Dominic was trapped. If he shot, Luca might click the button as he fell. She looked around. She saw a metal pipe on the ground near her feet. She looked at Luca, who was focused entirely on Dominic. She remembered Dominic's words, "Stay behind cover," but Dominic was going to die. Lila took a breath. She stood up. She stepped out from behind the crates into the harsh overhead light. "Hey, Luca," she shouted. Luca's head snapped toward her, distracted for a split second by the unexpected voice. "You forgot the maid," Lila yelled, her voice echoing. The distraction was minuscule, barely a heartbeat, but for Dominic Vale, a heartbeat was an eternity. In the fraction of a second that Luca's eyes flickered to Lila, Dominic moved. He raised his gun and fired a single shot. The bullet struck Luca's hand, shattering the detonator. Luca screamed, dropping the device. Before Luca could reach for his fallen gun, a second shot rang out from the catwalks above. Eva. The bullet struck Luca in the shoulder, spinning him around and knocking him to the concrete. He groaned, trying to rise, but 3 of Dominic's men were on him instantly, kicking the weapons away and pinning him to the ground. It was over. Dominic did not look at Luca. He holstered his gun and walked straight to Lila. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He grabbed her shoulders. "I told you to stay down," he roared, though his voice was shaking. "I told you I was your partner." Lila shot back, though her knees were trembling. Dominic stared at her. Then he let out a jagged breath and pulled her into him, crushing her against his chest. He buried his face in her neck, shaking his head. "You are crazy," he mumbled into her skin. "You are absolutely crazy. I learned from the best," she whispered, holding him tight. The police sirens were wailing in the distance. Dominic stood in front of his remaining men and Eva. Luca had been dragged away, bound for a police precinct where an anonymous tip and a mountain of evidence provided by Eva would ensure he spent the rest of his life in a supermax cell. Dominic looked at his crew. He looked at the warehouse, the symbol of his power and his burden. Then he looked at Lila, standing by the car, wiping soot from her face. He turned back to Eva. "It is yours," Dominic said. Eva blinked, stunned. "What? The syndicate," Dominic said. "The shipping lines, the hotels, it is yours." "I am done." "Boss," one of the men asked, confused. "I am stepping back," Dominic announced, his voice carrying clearly in the cool night air. "We are pivoting. No more street wars, no more drugs. We go fully legitimate. Eva has the plans. She runs the show now. But what about you?" Eva asked softly. Dominic looked over his shoulder at Lila. She was watching him, a small, hopeful smile playing on her lips. "I have a life to build," Dominic said. He walked away from the circle of men. He walked over to Lila. The sirens were getting louder, the flashing lights painting the warehouse walls in blue and red. Dominic took both of Lila's hands in his. They were dirty, bruised and trembling, and they were the most beautiful things he had ever seen. "Lila," he said. He reached into his pocket. He did not pull out a contract. He did not pull out a tracker. He pulled out a simple platinum band. It was unadorned, strong and infinite. "No more deals," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "No more protection on paper, no more pretending." He dropped to one knee on the asphalt. "Lila Moreno, will you marry me? For real this time. For the bad days and the good days. For a life where no one shoots at us. Will you be my wife?" Lila looked down at him. Tears streamed freely down her face, cutting tracks through the dust. She looked at the man who had been a monster, a savior, and now just a man in love. "Yes," she choked out. "Yes, Dominic, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and pulled her close. Their fingers interlocked, the metal of the ring cool against his skin. He leaned in, and when he kissed her, there was no desperation, no fear. It was slow, tender, and filled with a profound relief. It was the kiss of a man who had finally come home. 6 months later, the house was small, a white cottage perched on a cliff overlooking the harbor, miles away from the city center. The wind chimes on the porch sang a gentle song in the breeze. Inside, the air smelled of basil and garlic. Dominic Vale stood at the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, barefoot on the hardwood floor. The scars on his body were fading, white lines that mapped a history he no longer lived. Lila was in the living room, folding a stack of fresh white linens. She hummed softly to herself, the sunlight streaming through the window catching the platinum ring on her finger. Dominic turned down the heat on the stove. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked quietly into the living room. He sneaked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot beneath her ear. Lila leaned back into him, smiling. "Is dinner ready?" she asked. "Almost," Dominic murmured. He tightened his arms around her, holding her secure. He looked out the window at the ocean, peaceful and vast. "You know," he whispered, his voice low and rumbling against her back, "I still cannot believe it." "Believe what?" Lila asked, turning in his arms to face him. "That the maid I tried to protect on paper." He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb, his eyes full of wonder. "Now owns my soul." Lila smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the warmth of his skin, the reality of his presence. "She does not just own it, Dominic," she whispered. "She cherishes it." She pulled him down to her. Their lips met in a warm, lingering kiss, a kiss with no taste of fear, no shadow of danger. It was just two people, standing in a sunlit room, who had chosen each other when the world tried to tear them apart, and who had survived to find peace in the quiet moments in between. Thank you so much for listening to the story Wait. Are you going to put that in me? I hope you enjoyed the journey of Lila and Dominic as much as I enjoyed writing it. If you like this story, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear where you are listening from and what your favorite part of the story was. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for the Mafia Romance Stories channel so you never miss a new episode. Share your thoughts in English in the comments, and I will see you in the next story. Until then, keep reading and keep dreaming.